from 1989, and then there's additional data from 1994 to 1998.
Yeah.
So I used two surveys. It's a survey study, and basically the paper is it regards the USSR institutional framework and how that is the foundation for gender, occupational, and wage discrimination. So there's a legacy framework that basically precluded women from achieving equality with men. So let's just go through it. So the Soviet framework workforce was incorporated into the social sphere of production, and there was a strong emphasis on including both genders into this family of labor. Men were directed to the production sphere, which is mainly manufacturing, mining, and sort of the labor-intensive means of production and those enterprises. Women were directed to the sphere of non-production, which were ironically the white-collar jobs, accounting, finance, and then services. Like I said before, women were fully incorporated into the labor force, and they were actually given provisions for maternity leave, and they were basically incentivized to work in the sphere of non-production. In the 1970s, this is from Macaulay, from a journal, and I know Matt had some data from the World Bank in 1981 about the participation rates, but in the 1970s there was a shocking female participation rate of 90%. So women were fully incorporated into the workforce. There was also a fostering of the education of females and women at an early age to basically gear them for their service in the sphere of non-production, those sort of types of roles. So there were studies, education levels were higher amongst females than men, and it basically geared them for their roles in the family of workforce. Soviet organizational structure, you have state-owned enterprises, wages were determined by those authorities. State paid wages according to levels of production. So you have, they placed the importance on marginal output per worker. Therefore, you were compensated according to how much output the company generated, not necessarily the individual worker. But so those enterprises in the sphere of production were male-dominated, and ultimately those men were compensated more. You have the females. Unfortunately, they were assigned to roles in the sphere of non-production, which typically paid less. So women were paid less. They were also they were given these provisions to sort of incentivize them to work and to also uphold the role of a mother and wife and family caregiver. So it was sort of a twofold ethos. One is to fully incorporate them into the family workforce, but the other is to sort of direct their sort of preferences and interests, and ultimately build this dual role responsibility of both a worker, significant contributor to the nation's workforce, but also to their own family and to the prosperity of the male-dominated household or the family. So So part of the role assignment was due to the sexual stereotyping. Women were confined to lower paying jobs, and typically jobs that involved little or no labor. And there was sort of an ideology surrounding the female, and that they were anatomical, physiological peculiarities of the female organism, and likewise to the moral, ethical temperament of women.
Could you explain that, Carter?
So honestly, it was.
Or okay.
Yeah, no, this was sort of the patriarchal kind of ethos, and it was.
What does that mean, anatomical, physiological?
It's just a way to sort of separate them from
like
the
men
male.
are strong, so they should be doing labor. Like
oh, it's more like social
houses,
constructs.
And women are like not as strong, so they should be like nursing or accounting.
Okay. I thought it was just like off of physical appearance.
No, I think it's
okay.
Well, physiological meaning.
Right.
Anyways,
but the funny one, though, I think is the moral, ethical temperament. I mean, that's wow.
well, that's like their way of being sensitive to the female.
Female being the one who's
that they're trying
going out
to
and
preserve.
drinking all the vodka and
I don't
running
want
around.
to say anything more on this topic.
It's a great quote. It's a great quote.
Okay.
But I think it captures the way that they think about men and women.
They had to somehow define their,
Yeah.
their reason. So transition to market economy. The market or the economy was centrally planned before this transition. The enterprises were state-owned, and so this is the transition to privatization of enterprises, and not all enterprises were privatized. A majority of them were, but unfortunately many of the services and sort of non-production sphere enterprises were still state-owned, which affected women. They were left with a state-determined wage system because a lot of those jobs were state-owned organizations rather than newly privatized organizations where negotiations could take place between management and the government, and wages could be determined, through a market equilibrium or through negotiations rather than the arbitrary wage determination that preceded this. I liked the graph that you used from Bruno.
Excellent graph.
Yes, it was very helpful. So I can't use it in my PowerPoint, but there was a large spike in inflation, and there was very little GDP growth when price liberalization took place and privatization took place. And so what happened were budget deficits grew, and there was a wider wage gap as a result. Women were hit pretty hard with this because a lot of their jobs were in the lower paying percentiles, and those were also subsequently state-owned enterprises which had fixed wage determinations, and there's survey data here from 1989 from Tag and Rod, which actually is an industrial city, and there's just broad numbers here. There was a female to male ratio of hourly wages of around 73%. So, females were making significantly less than men.
What's tagging rock?
Tagging Rock.
Where is that?
That is a good question. And I'm not sure, but it's still today a very industrial.
It's like one of the industrial centers.
Uh-huh.
Right.
I think it's in Westchester County. Pretty sure.
Yeah.
The 73, is that they make 73% less than they make 73
They
cents
make
on the
70
dollar?
They make 73% of the male wage.
Wow.
And then monthly earnings, they make 66% of that.
Why is there such a discrepancy? Is it they're working less hours?
They're probably, well, yeah, they're working less
Yeah.
hours, and they have less skills, just because
How
they're,
did you determine that from the
typical-
survey data?
well, there were, the survey had variables that were tested for, or that were requested from each,
It was part of the survey.
recipient.
Yeah.
What, yeah. So, they determined that women were less skilled because they were in services positions as opposed to like trade positions or labor intensive positions. That actually lowers their stock in the eyes of Russian management, so, and then they also work less hours, because of the dual role. Not only the role to work and serve, to serve in the labor force, but also the role to take care of the family. So this was a sort of an interesting study. This is a Russian longitudinal monitoring survey. There was 4 tranches there's 4 years of survey data collected. And what they did was they discovered that, due to the budget deficits, due to the lack of production, lack of demand for a lot of the output that was being generated within these enterprises, there was surpluses, production was sustained, but there was no way to sort of sell the output, and so there was this surplus, and so companies had a difficult time paying their employees, and so what happened was there was a phenomenon of wage arrears and payment in-kind transfers, which were a way to just reduce operating costs for these enterprises, and they ultimately, this study ultimately shows that there's a slight reduction in the gender wage differential due to this phenomenon. So that's sort of what I threw in. There was an aggregate stock of overdue wages. Something like 2/3 of everybody employed were not getting paid on time.
It minimized the income gap, you said?
It did. I'll get in there. So the survey shows that there's just not only wage inequality, but that the various wage estimations show that 87% and 97%